Excellent. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Kim Havens, and I am the event manager here at An Unlikely Story, where I'm right in the bookstore. So happy to virtually see you all here. We've got a great crowd to welcome Alka Joshi to celebrate the paperback release of her debut novel, The Henna Artist. So before we start, I have a couple of technical tips to share with you. If you have any issues with your video or your audio quality, just try refreshing your page, and that should totally fix everything. Sometimes I will find that the author will disappear on my screen and I completely freak out, but really all you have to do is refresh it and they will come right back. Questions, you can enter them. We're going to do, change it a little bit. You can just ask them right in the chat. And then Alka is going to talk a little bit about her writing process and how she got to where she was, and followed by questions. So when we come to that, you can just ask them right in there and we will get to as many as we can. If you would like to purchase a paperback copy of The Henna Artist, which we have right here, it is absolutely gorgeous, or pre-order The Secret Keepers of Jaipur, which comes out in June, you can click the green button at the center bottom of the screen. Alka was kind enough to sign book plates for us, so when you order a copy from us, we'll include one as long as supplies last, and it will take a little bit longer to receive your book, just so you know. Born in Jaipur, Rajasthan, India, Alka has lived in the US since the age of 9. Before becoming an author, she earned a BA from Stanford University, leading to a successful career in advertising, running her own PR agency for 30 years. After writing commercials and marketing copy for decades, her husband encouraged her to try fiction, and I think we all owe him a huge gratitude. Alka enrolled in the MFA program at the California College of the Arts and began her brilliant career as a novelist. She has lived in France and Italy and currently joins us from Pacific Grove, California, where she lives with her husband. The Henna Artist was her first novel, and it has just been a spectacular success. The accolades are overwhelming, including being chosen by Reese Witherspoon for her book club, climbing bestseller lists everywhere, and has been optioned for film. The Henna Artist takes place in 1950s Jaipur, with Lakshmi escaping an abusive arranged marriage and running from her rural village to the vibrant pink city. There she becomes a henna artist and confidant, most in demand to the wealthy women of the upper class. When you pick up The Henna Artist, you're immediately transported and can almost smell the sandalwood, flowers, and spices Lakshmi uses in her herbal remedies. I found the perfect quote in Publishers Weekly. They so eloquently stated it. Joshi's evocative descriptions capture India's sensory ambiance, horse-drawn tangas, pungent cooking fires and incense, and colorful saris, drawing readers deep into her moving story. Joshi masterfully balances a yearning for self-discovery with the need for familial love. Her second novel, The Secret Keepers of Jaipur, continues the story of Lakshmi and her family, and now that I felt like I knew the characters, I'd say I loved it even more than The Henna Artist. And I was thinking on the way here that I really wanted to know more about one certain character and thought that would be amazing if she wrote a third book about Radha. So we will find out some more about that. Maybe I will get lucky. She is also working on a screen adaptation of The Henna Artist. So now, without further ado, it is my great honor to welcome New York Times best-selling author, Alka Joshi. Welcome.
Thank you, Kim. Wow, what an introduction. I feel so special.
I'm a huge fan.
And thank you to An Unlikely Story for having me on here today. I think that this is just amazing that I get to talk to all of the patrons of your bookstore. All right, so you guys, I have had so many people ask me, what does it feel like to be an overnight success? Now, I am 63 years old. There is no overnight about me. There is just a lot of hard work behind me. And so I wanted to tell you how it took me 10 years to bring The Henna Artist into your hands. It all started in 2008. And that was the year that we had a huge mortgage crisis in this country and around the world. What that meant for my advertising and marketing business is that I was going to have a couple of years of flat revenue and even decreased revenue, because so many businesses were failing, and my clients were worried about whether they actually had the money to put forward for the projects that we had planned. So they put a hold on a lot of things. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do for the next 2 years? Always before, when I had weathered a recession like this, I thought, okay, I can go traveling, I can read, I can just hang out, I can go visit family, whatever it is I want to do. And I thought, this time, why don't I do what my husband has been asking me to do for the last 16 years, which is to start writing fiction. He said, you are always making up stories about people, and they're really good stories. I've read some of the sort of chit chat that you put together on email for your friends. Why not think about maybe joining an MFA program where you can do this and learn how to write a novel? So I always said to him, no, I'm just an advertising hack. I just do marketing brochures. I'm not really a real writer. And he said, I think you are. So I decided to test this. And for 2 years, I entered an MFA program in creative writing so that I would come out with a master's and a thesis that might become a novel someday. Now, at the same time that all of this was happening, my younger brother has bought a condo in Jaipur. We used to live there at one time. We have all of our extended family practically there. And so every time we go to India, that's where we visit. He bought a condo just for my parents so that he could outfit it, furnish it. And then he said to them, you guys are getting older and nostalgic and you want to visit home. So here you are. Here are the keys. You can visit anytime and stay for as long as you want. And my mother said to me, let's go. So the 2 years that I was in this program, I had breaks between semesters. I had, spring breaks. I had all kinds of different breaks, summer breaks. And so Mom and I would go visiting in Jaipur during those breaks. And what would happen is that Mom would start remembering all kinds of things that had happened in India, a country that we had not been to for several decades. And, as we went to the Jaipur Palace to tour the palace, she remembered the time that she had had an audience with the Maharani, who wanted to meet with all of the wives of families who were going abroad, the way that my mother was. When we went to visit her old school, my mother told me about the time that she was 18 years old and in college, her first year studying psychology. She loved it. But her father called her and said, it is time for you to get married. We have found this engineer for you. And, your life is going to be grand. He is perfect. The astrological charts match. So my mother goes home and she never even says word one to my father from across the room. But then the next time they see each other, they're walking 7 times around the fire and getting married. And at some point, as I am listening to my mother's stories, it occurs to me that my mother has raised me so differently from the way she was raised. My mother never had the chance to decide on her own partner, to decide whether she was going to finish college, whether she was going to have a career, and what kind of a family or how many children she was going to have. She had to have all of those decisions made for her because of the societal rules that she lived within. But when we moved to America in 1967, when I was about 9, I think there was so much going on in America. There was all this craziness with women burning bras and sexual revolution and the summer of love happening in San Francisco. And, there was going to be a man on the moon in a couple of years. Everybody was so excited about the Apollo flights. And, there was this kind of sense of change and this ability to have a voice about all kinds of things that were happening. Students were rioting at Kent State about the Vietnam War. There was just so much vibrancy here that my mother hadn't experienced among women and young people in India. And she thought, I think I can raise my daughter very differently here than I could have back home. So with me, she always said, you will decide your own partner, you will decide your own career, you will decide whatever kind of family you want to have and whether you want to have children. So I was thinking, what a remarkable thing that my mother, as an immigrant woman, was able to make all of these new rules about how she was going to raise her kids. And what if I could give her a gift back, a gift like Lakshmi in The Henna Artist, a fictional character who gets to escape her marriage, who gets to do whatever she wants in her life, to forge a new path, and to determine for herself how she's going to navigate the patriarchy. So this is exactly what Lakshmi does. Of course, my mother read bits and portions of the novel because I wrote so much of it while we were in Jaipur and while she was remembering all these things about the 1950s and 60s. So what she said to me was, well, it's interesting that you have made my alter ego a henna artist. I've never done henna in my life. I've always had, women come to the house to do henna. And I said, that's okay, Mom. Nobody's going to ask you if you've done henna before. And she said, okay, but the other thing that you have done in your novel is that you have Lakshmi doing this very elaborate henna on women's hands. But when I was married in 1955, which is when your novel starts, we had very, very crude henna. We had just like it was applied with fingers, the paste. And so they would apply a paste right here in a big circle, and then maybe they'd do little dots around it, and then they would just do the tips of the fingertips. So that was very different from the kind of henna that you are putting in your book. I said, that's okay, Mom. What they've taught me in my creative writing program is that as an author, I get to take a little bit of creative license. If I'm writing historical fiction, I can make it as authentic as possible, but there are some ways in which I get to have a little bit of leeway. And I think Lakshmi's ability to do henna art that is superseding what any of her competitors are doing is one of those licenses that I get to take. Mom said, okay. Well, I presented The Henna Artist and very early version of it as my thesis in 2011. In 2012, my mother died. It was very unexpected and it was very sudden. And I was so bereft. I was kind of devastated. And I thought, wow, I wrote this book for her and now she's no longer here. It doesn't make sense to keep going with it. And I gave it up. I just put it away. And by then, the recession was over, clients were calling. And so people were asking me to do work. And that's what I did. I have bills to pay. I have mortgages and so on. So, 2 years went by before one of my thesis advisors called me. Anita called and she said, whatever happened to that novel you were working on? It had so much promise. And I explained to her what had happened with Mom. And she said, look, one of the best ways to get through the grief process is really to work through the grief. And if this book represents your mother to you, then maybe let's work on that. So she and I, over the next year and a half, we worked on changes that she thought would make The Henna Artist stronger. And then she did the kindest thing, which is to send the novel, the manuscript, off to her literary agent, who called me within a week and said, oh my God, I love this book. I love Lakshmi. I love the henna art. I love everything about this book. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never even had to look for a literary agent. This is phenomenal. And I said, Emma, this is great. When do we get published? And she said, wait, not so fast. You have some work to do on this novel. We work on it for the next 3 years, she and I. And what she has me do is cut every other chapter out of the book. So I'm left with 140 pages on the floor, and I have to put in transition chapters that are going to somehow make the whole thing flow again. But in addition to that, she's having me cut some backstory, add some backstory, redo the epilogue, redo the ending over and over and over. Finally, at the end of 3 years, I say, Emma, when are we ever going to send this off to a publisher? And she said, you know what? I can't determine that for you. The only people who can are developmental editors. So you need to get yourself one of those. And here is a suggestion for one of them. And you need to pay them to look over your manuscript. She said, I have been with you for many years now, and I don't have a fresh eye on it anymore. So I thought, okay, so I get myself one developmental editor, and she's lovely and she gives me a lot of comments back. But, I just don't have the heart to work on them because I think I just spent 3 years working on changes. And then before that, a year with my old thesis advisor. And then before that, 2 years in the program that I was in. I don't want to make more changes. So I hired another developmental editor. And guess what? She also sent me back pages and pages and pages, 12 pages to be exact, of all of these changes that she thought I should make in order to make The Henna Artist publishable. And, at that time, I just lost it. I just thought, you know what? I have worked on this for so long and so hard. Why am I being asked to keep revising, re-editing, revisioning this entire book. I don't want to do that anymore. I had this vision of this idea in my head. I had this story. I used my mom as an inspiration for it. And now everybody and their mother has to tell me what to do with it. I was so mad that I just thought, maybe I'm not meant to be an author. Maybe I'm not meant to ever publish the Henna Artist. And I put it away in a drawer. Another year went by. And at this point, I decided, okay, I'm looking in my desk drawer for something, and I run across the manuscript and I go, oh, I'm curious. I decide to read it. And as I'm reading it, about an hour later, I pull my head out of the manuscript and I go, wow, I kind of like this story. I like these characters. I like Lakshmi. I like Radha. I like Malik. I want to know what's happening to them too. Now, if I, as the writer of this piece, can enjoy my own work, maybe somebody else could like it too. Maybe readers will be intrigued by this. So then I thought, all right, let me just look at those editorial comments again that I was sent. I read through all of the comments, and this time, because I've had a year's worth of distance from them, I'm able to see them not for the sort of, you need to cut this out, you need to cut that out, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm able to see that what they're saying is, this is a good book, it's going to be published, but you could make this so much stronger if you just made this particular character more compelling, if you just made this scene more compelling, if you worked on your epilogue a little bit harder. So I thought, all right, what have I got to lose? I start working on it again. Another year and a half goes by while I'm working on these changes, because the changes aren't minor. They involve the trajectory of some of the characters, which means I have to start all over from page 1. I finally send the manuscript back to Emma, my literary agent, and I say, Emma, it has been 9 years since I first started working on this book. Could we please send it off to an editor now? I have done everything you have told me to do. I have made every edit, and I have hired the editors, and I have made their edits. Please, let's send it. So she did. And within 2 months, we get a contract from Mira Books, which is a division of HTP Books, which is a division of HarperCollins. Now, I have a contract. What that means when you're an author is that there is still another 18 months to 2 years to go before the book is going to be showing up in libraries and in bookstores. And during those 18 months to 2 years, I'm working with my new editor, Kathy, who also has changes that she would like me to make. And the art department is coming up with this fabulous cover, and they also designed this fabulous cover, which I think is just stunning. And then the marketing department is coming up with a title for my book. Now, my initial title for the book was Henna, and then it became The Enemy of the Crocodile. And, the publisher said, yeah, you know what? Let us just figure out what the title should be, because, we have a better handle on what kind of a title is going to telegraph to somebody right away what the book is about. So they said, is it okay if we just call it The Henna Artist? I said, well, okay, fine. And then the sales department is doing a great bang-up job of selling the book, because HarperCollins had always intended for this book, the moment they bought it, to be a big book for 2020 for book clubs. They knew it was going to be popular. They knew that a lot of people would love it. And so they have sold it into all the independent bookstores, into all the Indigo stores up in Canada, all the Barnes and Nobles across the US, into the Amazon, into the Target, Walmart, Costco, everywhere. And the book is just waiting in the warehouses of these stores to be put on the shelves. My release date, which was set 18 months prior, was March the 10th, 2020. On March the 11th, 2020, the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic called COVID that was now going to restrict everything. One by one, every single book event that I was scheduled to be in, every book signing, every conference, every panel was canceled. And the libraries closed, and the bookstores closed. And Amazon stopped shipping out anything but toilet paper and paper towels and soap, which everybody needed because none of us could go to the stores. We didn't know then how dangerous this was. So I just thought to myself, well, just shoot me now. Just shoot me now, because I cannot believe that I just spent 12 years now at this point of my life working on a project called The Henna Artist, and I don't get to talk to reader one about this. And I just went to bed. I put the covers over my head and I just started crying. And I said to my husband, I am not coming out. This is your fault. You're the one who told me to go get a degree in writing creative fiction. Well, about a week later, Kathy, my editor at Mira Books, called and she said, I hope you're sitting down because I have some really exciting news for you. Reese Witherspoon is going to announce your book for her May book pick in 2020. I was so stunned I couldn't speak, because I thought, oh my God, is this really happening? Pinch me. Is this like a dream that I'm having? Is this a real thing? I mean, is this like the Reese Witherspoon? And Kathy said, yes, it is the Reese Witherspoon. So for the next 5 weeks, you're going to be working with her Hello Sunshine people, and you're going to pull together some social media content relating to the henna artist that they can put on all of their social platforms. You're going to put together cooking videos and information about your mom and her saris and her dowry. And then I asked my older brother to develop a Maharani cocktail for Maharani Indra, who liked to water her orchids with gin and tonics, something that the British left behind. You know, we are just having so much fun doing all of this that I barely noticed May 1st has arrived. And now I'm supposed to have a chat with Reese Witherspoon. So we do our Zoom chat, and I am overwhelmed by this woman who is only 45 years old, 44, maybe 45. And she has created an empire of book clubs. And the thing that Reese Witherspoon has done, which is so phenomenal for us women, is that she promotes female authors only, with female protagonists at their center, who are going to inspire us, engage us, somehow help us move forward in our lives. And she's done such a phenomenal job that now when you look at the New York Times bestseller list, her books are going to be among 4 or 5 of that 15-book bestseller list. And that is an amazing feat for one woman to have accomplished. She is phenomenal. So we start climbing the bestseller list almost as soon as Reese announces, but also the libraries start opening limited hours and do curbside pickup. And the bookstores have realized, okay, we're not going to pass COVID through books, so let's start shipping these books out. Amazon is also shipping books out. It coincided all at the same time. And then what was so phenomenal also is that people who couldn't get access to the physical book, they started getting the ebook and the audiobook, and those two behaviors changed during the pandemic for everybody. People started relying more on the digital formats. So now the movie companies start calling. And that was another stunning thing that happened, because I thought, oh my God, I don't know how to talk to movie companies. How am I going to handle this? I call my agent in New York. I go, help. And then they contract out to a Hollywood management agency, an agency that's now going to handle me in Hollywood just with the movie proposals. And so the first thing that Ellen Goldsmith, the CEO of the Gotham Group, asks me is, listen, Alka, do you want this to be a movie of the henna artist, or do you want this to be some kind of a limited series or a streaming series? And I said, oh my gosh, I am so addicted to streaming series on Hulu and Netflix and Amazon. I would love to see the henna artist as a streaming series. There are so many characters in here that can be developed further. There are so many scenes that can be enacted, and instead of just being in prose, they could actually be enacted. And so I said, hands down, I want a streaming series. I love streaming series, and I would love to see the henna artist as one of those. So she said, okay. And she went back to all of the people who were interested in buying the options for the henna artist as a screen production. And she said, this is what the author wants. And that's what they all came back with. So then I get to Zoom with all of these production teams, usually with an actress at the center who would like to play Lakshmi. So it was what a phenomenal experience that was. And in the end, nobody can tell the author exactly what to do. So, you know, I made the best decision, I think, in my mind, that was possible at the time, which is to go with the team of Michael Edelstein, who had been in charge of NBC Universal Studios in London, at the time that Downton Abbey was getting filmed. So he said that when he read The Henna Artist, he really saw this as an Indian Downton Abbey, as something where we have the upstairs class and the downstairs class, something where we have a lot of different characters whose stories we are following, and also something that we can make lush and just absolutely gorgeous. So he said, so then I sent it to Frida Pinto, whom he knows for a long time. And he said, Frida, I think this could be a great vehicle for you to star in. And also, I know you want to executive produce, and this would be perfect. So she said, oh my God, she read it and she said, I'm on board. Absolutely. So then Michael has a first look deal with Miramax TV, and then they're on board. And so now that is what is in development. And development means that they have about 18 months of work to do before we can actually start filming, because there is so much pre-planning that goes into doing a series. You know, there's the writing, there's the location scouting, there's the casting, there's lots of stuff that has to go on. So I am really excited that The Henna Artist could be filmed as early as 2022. Now, at the same time that we put The Henna Artist to bed, I started working on the next book, because Malik, who is only 8 years old in The Henna Artist, is now 20 in my head, and he will not leave me alone. And he keeps saying, you know, I have a story to tell. I have a story to tell. Why don't you tell my story? So I started telling it, and I had written about 20 pages of it. My agent says, let's send those pages off to Mira Books. We did, and they bought The Secret Keeper even before The Henna Artist had come out. So then I finished The Secret Keeper. It was so wonderful to write this book with all of these characters, just a little bit older and still doing the same kinds of things that they were doing before. See, I know the characters so well from The Henna Artist that I can imagine them now in different scenarios. I've lived with them for 10, 12 years, and I totally understand what their intentions in life are, what their goals are, where they're trying to go. So Malik is 20 years old in The Secret Keeper. And as Kim said very generously, thank you so much, Kim, this is just as intriguing a story as The Henna Artist, because Malik is now going to be involved in all kinds of activities that are happening in Jaipur and also across the Himalayas, where all the gold running is happening. And also he has his own beloved to protect up in the Himalayas. He also has Manu and Kanta, who still live in Jaipur. Manu and Kanta are the ones who adopted the baby that Radha had. And of course, they are involved in the Jaipur Palace, and Manu is Malik's boss when he comes down to Jaipur to do an apprenticeship at the palace. So Malik is trying very hard to protect everybody he loves from all of the shenanigans that are going on in Jaipur. And he's going to have to figure out some clever ways to get around that. Of course, he's going to have to enlist Lakshmi's help up in Shimla. She's going to have to come down and help him out. So that is book number 2. And that is available for pre-order now. I hope you will all pre-order it, because that is how publishers determine how many books they are actually going to print. So the more pre-orders they get, the more they know that they can print a whole bunch of books. And then as soon as this got sent to the printer, I started working on book number 3, which we can talk a little more about. So this is just wonderful. Danielle is saying Reese's Book Club was how I was introduced to The Henna Artist. Huge fan. I know, right? I'm a huge fan of Reese's Book Club and Reese herself, because she is like the girl next door who, you know, she tells you that she really liked this book, and it made her you know, get inspired and feel like she could change her life, then, you know, everybody believes her because she is that genuine. She really, that is the way that she comes across. It's really amazing. From Deb, I have a question here. How did your father feel about your mother's ideas to raise you differently than they had been raised? So, okay, this is kind of interesting because my dad was so busy working. I told you that he was an engineer. In India, he was the kind of engineer who was helping rebuild India after the British left, just like I mentioned in The Henna Artist. You know, in 1955, you've got this new crop of young engineers, and they are building roads and dams and bridges and buildings and, you know, colleges and institutions, because India is finally feeling like they have their country back. You know, Indians are feeling like, I can determine my own future. We can set up our own policies about ourselves. We can, after 200 years of British rule, we can actually determine how we want to educate our own people. And so Dad was one of those people, very exuberant, very good at his job. We were constantly being moved from city to city as he worked on one project after another. And then at the 10-year mark in their marriage, my father said, you know what? I have decided that I want to get a doctorate abroad. So we're either going to go to Germany at this one university, or we're going to go to Iowa in the United States. We end up going to Iowa. And then my dad is very busy working on that doctorate. You know, my brothers and I are like, 8, 10, 11 years old, or 8, 9, 10 years old. And Dad is constantly at the office. He's constantly studying. The university made him do his master's over again, which he had already gotten in India. So he ended up doing a master's and a PhD in 3 years, which is phenomenal, at the same time that Mom is raising the 3 of us. So Dad really had very little idea how Mom was raising us all those years. He wasn't really around. He was constantly at the lab or at the school or whatever he was doing. And so I don't think he had any idea until we became teenagers. And all of a sudden he's like, hey, where did these kids come from? So that was kind of an interesting thing that happened. So I think Dad was kind of clueless. Okay, so let's see. Kathleen is saying, I'm really enjoying all the details that Alka's sharing. Thank you. I can't see the chat on my small device. Oh no, I'm sorry you can't see. Well, your comment is absolutely delicious. And thank you so much for making it, Kathleen. I can see it just fine. And I read it. And thank you so much. Okay, Danielle says, how did you balance your editor's suggestions and your own vision for the book? Okay. So this is something that everybody wants to know. Like, how do you figure out as an author whether the editor is having you do something that you don't want to do, or whether the agent is having you do something that you don't want to do? Maybe they've got a vision for the book that's different from yours. It took me a while to figure out how to separate my intention for the book versus their vision for the book. So I'll give you some examples. My literary agent, here's why she had me cut out 140 pages. She said, look, Alka, right now, you've got a first person encounter in chapter 1 of Lakshmi. Then in chapter 2, you've got Radha's first person encounter, and then Lakshmi, and then Radha. And this is how you're alternating the chapters. Now, when you have 2 voices that are telling you the story, each of them have to be as compelling as the other. Right now, she said, what I'm seeing is that Lakshmi is very compelling. Radha is not as compelling. In fact, like a lot of my readers, Radha drives a lot of people crazy, especially if they've raised teenagers and they're like, oh, oy vey, I can't believe another teenager who's going to give her sister all this grief. So, what Emma, my literary agent, was trying to say is either get rid of all of the Radha chapters and figure out how to incorporate her life into Lakshmi's point of view, or you've got to make Radha more compelling. And I thought, okay, you know what? I love the story just the way that it is, so I'm going to make Radha more compelling. And I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and sent it back to her. And she said, it's not working. And at that point, I had to say, let me try it her way. So I tried it Emma's way, and I cut out every other chapter. And then I did some transition work to make sure that the chapters flowed together and that we could still see what Radha was up to based on conversations that Lakshmi was hearing, or, things that she was learning from Kanta. And guess what? It was way better when I followed Emma's suggestions. So this is how I had to work it with every editor that I have had since then. Every time they make a suggestion, my impulse is sometimes to say, no, that's going to be too much work if I have to go all the way back to chapter 1. I don't want to do that. But I have found that in the 80% to 85% of the suggestions that they have made, they have been absolutely right. And you know why? because they know better, because they have all been in this business of writing and publishing far longer than I have. Who am I? You know, I started out as a student of fiction, trying to write a novel. In 2 years, I did not learn enough in order to write a novel that was compelling enough to stay with people. In 5 years, I had not learned enough. In 7 years, I was learning more and more and more, and I really knew my characters by then, but I still hadn't figured out exactly how to make everything work. But by 10 years, I had figured out how to do it. And at that point, when readers start telling you that they cannot put the book down, when readers start telling you that they care so much about the characters and they're sad to leave them, then you know you've done your work as an author. And that's where those editors and my literary agent were trying to get me. My literary agent very early on said to me, Alka, you're a debut author. You have never written a short story. You have never published an article in a newspaper or magazine. You have no pedigree as a writer. So your debut novel has to be the best thing that it can possibly be. It has to be a bestseller if you're going to get a second book contract and a third book contract. So I am not letting this out of my stable, she said, until I think it's absolutely ready. And I'm so delighted that she did. You know, initially I was mad at her because she wouldn't send it out. She wouldn't send it out. But now I totally understand why she did that. And I'm just so glad that I have had the kinds of people working on my book who have helped me. Because, you know, I could not have done this without them, you guys. I couldn't have designed this cover by myself. I couldn't have come up with a title that would make people want to pick the book up off the shelf. I am so grateful for everybody who has helped me on this journey. And it has taken a village to make that happen. Okay, so let's see. How old were you, Alexandria says, when you made your first book? Hey, I was 62 when the Henna Artist came out, and now I'm 63. So that's how old I was when I made my first book. Nicole is asking where in Iowa we were. We were in Ames, Iowa at Iowa State University. I don't know if you're familiar with Iowa or if you know what that is, but it was an interesting experience to come from the desert state of Rajasthan where it's dusty and it's hot and it's like 115 degrees in the shade in the summertime, to Iowa, where even in April when we got here to the United States, it was there was a snowstorm and it was like 20 below zero with the wind chill factor. We were not ready for the winters at all. We had to rush out to the Kmart and get clothes. And, you know, it was a mess for a while. Okay, let's see from Kim. Madho Singh is hilarious. How did you decide to include him? Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful question, Kim. So I did all of this research on Maharanis and Maharajas, because I had to make this novel sound authentic. I did lots of research with people who had actually been alive during that era, including my parents and their friends. I did lots of research with Rajput families who had adopted outside of their family in order to install them as crown princes. I did research. I watched a lot of movies of that era. I read a lot of books from that era, a lot of novels that were written by Indians during the 1950s and 60s. So when it came time to talk about the Maharajas and Maharanis, I read this wonderful book by a Maharani of Jaipur, whom I actually modeled the younger Maharani in the Henna Artist after. And her name was Maharani Gayatri Devi. She wrote a book called A Princess Remembers. And she included all these lovely details about palace life. One of them was that palaces love to have talking birds as their pets, because every time there were dignitaries or any kind of guests in the palace, these birds would imitate them and provide all this entertainment, you know, something that dogs can't do. And hey, I'm a dog lover, I have dogs, but you know, my dogs cannot imitate people the way that a talking bird can. So that is where Madho Singh came from. And then I thought, okay, as long as I'm going to have a talking bird, who is going to get the talking bird? And I thought it's going to be the older Maharani, because her husband did not allow her any agency while he was with her, right? He said, you know what? You are not going to have any natural born children, because I believe in my astrologer when he tells me that my natural born children are going to try to steal the throne from me. So I am going to adopt from outside another warrior caste family, and we are going to install them as the crown prince. And so I thought it would only be natural for that older Maharani Indra to then get her talking parakeet, name him after her husband, and then order him around everywhere. Tell him, you're going to stay here. You're going to get in the cage. Now you're going to drink out of my palm, this liquid opium that I am feeding to Lakshmi. So that was kind of where that came from. And yes, it was absolutely the truth that the Maharajas would not believe their own children, would not believe their wives when the wives said, please do not banish my son to another state, to another country. Please let him be the crown prince. And they said, no, I believe the astrologer. He said, I cannot let my own son take the throne. So that is exactly what I'm going to do. So that actually did happen many times with Maharajas. All right, let's see. Loved all the details about herbs and their uses. How did you research this? Oh my gosh, so much research went into it. I did a lot of research on plants. And then, okay. You all can still hear me, right? Okay. All right. I'm hoping everybody can hear me.
Fine. Yep.
Okay. Okay, great. Okay. So for the herbs, I grew up in a South Asian household, and we grew up with lots of herbs and spices just naturally in our households. All of those spices that are used to make Indian curries, there's like 10, 12, sometimes 14 different things that we use. Well, I watch my mother do it. I've done it myself. I love cooking Indian food. And so many of these spices I know are beneficial for our bodies, because that is why we use so many of them. Turmeric is really good for anti-inflammatory purposes. My father, who's 88, still drinks his warm milk with turmeric every single day with a little bit of honey inside. And, I think it helps his joints, and he walks 2 miles a day and he swims. So, more power to him. And then the cumin seed is really a wonderful spice to use in almost everything. It flavors your food, and it's great for digestion. Same thing with fennel. Like if we had ever had indigestion, my mother would say, chew some fennel seeds, it will go away. So there's so much that we already know about the spices we use and how beneficial they are for the body. And then I just had to do some very specific research, like, what is a spice that would really help with arthritis? So for Mrs. Patel's arthritis, I think Lakshmi puts together some sweet potato samosas and things like that. So there's a lot of knowledge out there to be gained from people who have always cooked like this. They have cooked the same way their grandmothers did, their mothers did, their great-grandmothers did. And so we all know about these herbs and spices. For things like the cotton root bark, I had to do very specific research because I didn't know what women were using at that time to prevent unwanted pregnancies. And so one of the things I found out in doing that research is that no matter where a woman has lived throughout the centuries, no matter what culture she has been from, there have always been herbs that have been used to mix with hot water, to mix with teas that have eliminated unwanted pregnancy. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me. And then in one of the book groups that I had, all these doctors who are in New York, all these female doctors who were in that book group told me that, actually it's, abortion is very common in the Western world. About 25% of women have actually had abortions, which kind of blew my mind, but at least it let me know that I wasn't alone in writing about this. Okay, from Beverly, I loved your book. Do you have a favorite author, and what books have you read recently that you would recommend? I always have read over and over, I think 2 books. I love to read. I read about 8 or 10 books a month. But 2 of my favorites are Jane Eyre. I love Jane Eyre. I like her because she's plain, and she's plain spoken, and she will not kowtow to other people to tell her that she is worthless. I love that about her. Another book that I've always really loved is To Kill a Mockingbird, and maybe that has to do with Gregory Peck in the movie version playing Atticus Finch. I think he's so handsome. And so I have a ton of books that I also mention in the back of the Henna Artist, books that authors I love and authors I read in order to inform me about what was happening in the 1950s. There are so many wonderful authors. Another great author is Tagore, Tagore. He is from Bengal. And he lived, to be 103 years old or something. He's some phenomenal age, but he was a huge literary genius. He was known throughout the world in his time. He wrote a lot of poems, a lot of novels and short stories, and he really seemed to get women. He really understood the repression of women and, what happens to women when they do get repressed by social convention. Okay, thank you, Beverly, for your question. Danielle says, do you portray Samir and Hari to be good guys? Did I intend for them to be good guys or no? I think what I'm trying to say throughout the book is that we all have the capacity to change. And every single main character in this book does change. Lakshmi changes in the sense that she realizes what is truly important to her and is not what she's been doing for the last 10 years, but something that her sauce taught her all those years ago. Radha realizes that she can't just have everything she wants. There are going to be times when somebody else is going to know better for, because she hasn't lived long enough, she hasn't experienced enough to know all the right decisions to be making. Samir, I think, realizes too late that maybe he shouldn't have let go of Lakshmi quite as easily. And I think that Dr. Kumar realizes that perhaps it's a combination of Eastern and Western medicine that will serve the people that he is not able to reach in his practice, that maybe there is some value in age-old herbal remedies as opposed to just the allopathic medicine. So I think in every single case, I'm trying to make sure that we have characters who have experienced enough throughout the book to have somehow undergone a fundamental change. Thank you so much for your question. Carol, okay, let's see. Oh my goodness, so many questions. From Kim. Kim says, how long did it take to write the first draft? The first draft, it only took less than a year. Only took less than a year. But there have been a lot of changes in the story since that year. So the version that you guys are reading in the paperback version of the Henna Artist that you have now, 30th draft, my dears. This was the 30th draft of the Henna Artist. Okay, Nicole says, my mom went to Iowa in Iowa City. Oh, wonderful. Iowa is, it's a great state. And we got great education there. I mean, our public school education in Iowa and Missouri and Kansas was phenomenal. All right, Carol says, I'm so impressed with your honesty and talent. Thank you for sharing everything with us. Carol, namaste. Thank you so much for that. Pam says, what a treat to be transported virtually to another place in Eyre, especially when we weren't able to travel. I learned so much about the Indian caste and culture from your story. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you for saying that, Pam. One of my goals in writing the Henna Artist, and I didn't know this at the start, right? At the start, I just thought I'm going to invent a different story for my mother, a different ending to her life. But what really happened in the process is I got to know India all over again through my mother's eyes and also through my eyes as I'm traveling to India all of those times that I was writing the Henna Artist. And I realized I come from this incredible place. I come from this rich country that has a lot of different things going on. We have a wealthy class. We have a middle class. We have a lower socioeconomic class. We have people of all different castes. We have people of all different socioeconomic positions. We have people who are, rebuilding India in all kinds of ways all the time. And then we have the people who are helping India make that happen. So there is colorism, there is casteism, there is classism in India, but there's also so much beauty. They coexist together. There are these ancient traditions like the henna art, like jewelry making, that have existed for millennia and that still exist today. And there are these gorgeous palaces and forts that still exist today. It's so lovely to be able to walk into these and feel what it must have felt like to walk into it for the first time the way Lakshmi did. So I just had, such a great time learning about my India that I wanted to share it with everybody else. I wanted them to know that India is this remarkable place, and that I am proud to have both my Indian heritage and my American heritage. I like being part of the East and the West. And it is only because of my distance from the East that I'm able to talk about India realistically, that I'm able to envision these characters realistically in all of their flaws, with their strengths, with their weaknesses, with their sadnesses, with their joys. Thanks so much for your comment, Pam. Okay, Danielle says, how did you first enter the advertising industry? I wanted to be an art director. Oh my God. I just thought, I really thought from the time I was a little girl that I was going to be an artist. I was going to, first of all, be a kick-ass, commercial artist. And I was going to draw things like Andy Warhol was doing for all of the Bonwit Tellers and the Bergdorf Goodmans of this world. I was going to draw all of those elegant drawings of clothes and shoes and everything. All right, that didn't happen. And so then I thought, well, I'm going to be the other kind of artist. I'm going to be a painter, and I will be, someday I'll be showing an exhibit at the Whitney Museum. Well, that didn't happen. And so ultimately, by the time I graduated from college, I thought, I have a degree in art history because I did love art, but what am I going to do with it? And so I did things for about 5-6 years. I did other kinds of things to pay my rent. But then I thought, you know what I could do? I could go into advertising, because if I were in the creative side of advertising, I could fulfill the creative part of what I always want to do and draw the pretty pictures. And I could also develop the other side of my very practical self, which is really focused. And, I meet my deadlines, and I'm really good with clients and so on. And so I go to the advertising agencies of San Francisco and I say, hey, I am here. I want to be an art director. And, I think I'm going to get a job right away. I've never worked in advertising in my life. I don't have any connections. My family has no connections in this life. And these two art directors are looking at me. This is in McCann Erickson. And they're looking at me and they're looking at my portfolio and they say, well, why do you want to be an art director? And I said, oh, because I've always seen myself as an artist and I want to draw the storyboards for all the commercials and so on. And they said, yeah, but did you write all of these other ads that are in here in your portfolio? I said, of course I did. And they said, well, you're a really good writer. We can hire you as a writer today. We don't have an art director position, but we have a position as a writer that we need, a junior position. And then, if you like it and you like us, at the end of 30 days, we'll hire you full time. But right now we can just try it out if you'd like. And I thought, well, okay. I mean, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but that's how I got into it. And I think that set of creative directors were the first people who realized that this girl can write. And I don't even think I knew I could write at that time. So thank God for them. Okay, from Megan on Facebook, in the Henna Artist, my friend and I had very different visions of the house she was building. Was it a house that we as Americans would perceive as grand or modest? It's a very modest house. So the house is no more than maybe 15 feet by 20 feet. It's really one large room. And at one end, there is a counter that has been built in with, using stucco or plaster or something. And it's jutting out from the wall. And then behind that are your cabinets for the kitchen. Otherwise, the rest of the room is your sleeping room, your, entertaining room, your whatever room, the table where she mixes all of her potions and things like that. And the only remarkable thing about this house is the floor. I wanted the floor to be a stand-in for Lakshmi's life. I wanted her to create on that floor exactly what she creates for women on their bodies. So she's creating for women their desire to be who they are and also who they really are. And that's what she creates on her floor. And you see, this is where my artistic skill came in, because I draw and I sketch all the time. I'm constantly, doodling or doing something. And so for me, for Lakshmi to be able to create the things she creates on that floor and for her to create the things she's creating on the women's bodies, those are all in my mind the way that I would have been as an artist. So, I got a chance to combine my two passions, art and writing, together in The Henna Artist and then The Secret Keeper and then book number 3. So thank you, Megan. Thank you for your question. I love it. Okay, Lauren is asking, did you have to research all of the Indian terms and vocabulary in the book, or did you learn them from your family? Hindi is my first language, so I know all of those terms. They are just, it's so funny because over the years, we have spoken sort of a mixture of Hindi and English in what we say. And sometimes, even with my husband, sometimes I will say, okay, this word has just come to me, honey. It is a Hindi word, but here is what it means. And I don't know in what reserve of my brain the Hindi language resides, but the words pop into my head every now and then. And, words like shabash, which means congratulations, these are words that we've used, all the time. Bevkoof, shabash, बहुत अच्छा है, आपका क्या हाल है, ठीक है. These are all just things that I just know. I just know it. And then of course there's all the food, right? Aloo gobi ki sabji and aloo ka parantas and rayata and rabdi and all of these things. These are just foods that my mother made all the time, and then I make them now. So these are all also words that I just happen to know. I think it was my agent who said, as an ode to Dickens, why don't we put in a cast of characters in the beginning of the book? Because a lot of people are not going to understand these names. They've never heard some of these names before. So I'm really happy that she asked me to do that, because I think it really helps for people to reference back time and again. There are a lot of characters and you need to know who they are. And so you have the cast of characters. Now, the glossary in the back is something my editor told me to do. Kathy said, let's go ahead and put all of the Hindi words in the back in a glossary. So, write them all out, tell me what the meanings of them are, and we'll put them in the back. So she's the one who suggested we do that. You see, it does take a village. I mean, everybody lends great stuff to this conversation. Okay, let's see. Samantha says, I really enjoyed The Henna Artist. Please series. Yes, I am more than happy to do that. And so, okay. So here, The Henna Artist is really largely about Lakshmi. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur is going to have a lot of Malik in it and Lakshmi. And then the third book is going to be more about Radha and Lakshmi. So in the third book, and this is stemming from all of this work I had already done in The Henna Artist that never made it into the book. I knew exactly what was going to happen to Radha, because that was one of the endings that I had written in The Henna Artist that got cut. So what happens to Radha is that at the age of 18, when she graduates from her fancy boarding school that Samir Singh paid for, she meets a Frenchman who is traveling through the Himalayas, just, on a tourist visa. And they flirt, they fall in love. She elopes with him. Radha doesn't do anything halfway. She just has to be so impetuous. So she runs away with him. She goes to Paris. She is married to him, and they have 2 little girls. And now the year is 1973 in the third book. Radha is working as a lab assistant to a master perfumer in a big fragrance house. Now, Radha was so good at mixing henna paint, and she was so good at mixing, paints for the old man in the village, that she ended up getting a chemistry degree at the Sorbonne. She used that chemistry degree to start working in the fragrance industry, which, as we all know, is huge in Paris, huge in France, huge in London, huge in New York. And so she works her way up from very junior lab assistant to the point now where she is one of 3 assistants to this master perfumer. She's on the cusp of designing a signature scent for this master perfumer when there is a knock at the door. And on the other side of that door of her apartment in the 7th arrondissement is somebody she hasn't seen for 18 years from the henna artist. And that person, I won't tell you who that person is because I think it should come as a surprise to you. But that person is wanting to know all about who Radha is and what she's doing here and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So she's going to be shocked. She is also it's going to interrupt this whole thing that she's doing with the master perfumer. And she is at some point going to leave and go down to India with Lakshmi. They're going to have a little sister chat about what to do about this new problem that has cropped up. And also they're going down there to look at all of the perfumes that are being made in India. So I'm doing lots of research on perfumes, lots of research on adoptions and adoptees, and it's going to be juicy. It's very juicy.
And you lived in France.
I have lived in France. And so, you know, Brad and I lived in Paris for about a year. So that informs me a lot about Paris, but I would love to be there right now. I can't go because of all the travel bans, but I would love to be able to go right now. And I want to go back to India also because I want to go to some of these places where flowers are harvested and a lot of these, the base notes of perfume are made.
Okay, so I have one more last question for you. Where will be, when you can get on a plane safely and travel, where is the first place you'll go?
Paris.
Paris.
Yes.
I think my husband and I think the same thing. Okay, we're going to Paris.
You know, I've also always been dying to go to Portugal. I would
me too.
I would love to go to Portugal. So that border is closed. The French border is closed because I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll go somewhere else in Europe and then kind of sneak into another border that way. No, U.S. citizens are not allowed to come in right now.
No, we're the pariahs right now. So we'll just sit in our naughty chairs and read books and enjoy each other's conversation.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh, this has been so delightful. Thank you so much for giving me. Oh, thanks so much for giving me this time. And look, we didn't even lose anybody. We've got 87 people here. This is absolutely fabulous. This is amazing.
And more on Facebook and more will watch it afterwards. So this is just delightful. So I'm such a huge fan. I hope you can come back and talk to us again about either book 2 or book 3. And I'm so delighted to hear that it's going to be a streaming series because you just nailed it. Like, and I'm like, oh, we're going to have season 1 and season 2 and season 3.
Oh, I hope so. Oh my God, this could be so good.
Thinking about it. So, this has been such a joy. Thank you so much for spending tonight with us. And everyone, go ahead and click that green button. You can pre-order The Secret Keeper of Jaipur and The Henna Artist in paperback, and we will go ahead and send along a signed book plate and keep writing.
You know, I can't wait for everybody to have all 3 books, and then because they look like a family. They're all going to look like a family, and beautiful. And they are about a family, so it's really lovely. Thank you so much for having me. Thanks everybody for being a part of this. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too.